This episode of the Capital G Show has been brought to you by the Titanfall lore. The critically acclaimed FPS that's good enough to cure cancer and make me buy an X-Bone is now in lore form. If you want to be entertained for 60 seconds, the link is in the description. What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about this recent surge in Dark World decks I've been seeing lately, and obviously a lot of it has to do with the fact that Dark World just got second place at YCS Chicago. And it was a pretty unique version at that. So first, let's take into consideration some of the meta trends that we saw last format and what might actually carry over until the first half of next format, until Primal Origins comes out and just is like a shit tornado on everything. First off, Skill Drain got pretty popular in Dragon decks. They use them so that they can keep their Dragon Rulers on board, and also it just completely wrecks decks like Girgia and Fire Fist and my deck Fujins. And then it's very good when you combine it with like Colossal Fighter and things like Stardust Dragon. We already know that outside of Torghast from the Underworld, Dark World as a deck just isn't hurt by Skill Drain in the least. And many players cite it themselves, so that's definitely one of the things that, when you see a Skill Drain, a Dragon Ruler player has flipped on you. If you're playing Dark World, you're like, okay, give no fucks. We also saw a lot of graveyard-dependent decks at the top of the format, things like Bujins and Mermils, and this bodes well for Dark World because when those are some of the most played decks in the format, when you happen to run into them, you know that you pretty much have 0% chance of having to deal with a card like Dimensional Fissure or Soul Drain coming out of their side decks. The last thing and the last trend that I saw was the rise in play of one trade-in. I think really Mythic Rulers was the deck that kind of put this on because, they could use the Water Dragons and the Blue Eyes, trade in those cards. They load their graveyard up with more dragons. And it was just a win-win. It got them to their combo pieces faster, made the deck more consistent, yada, yada, yada. And what I noticed with Dark World is a lot of players slowly but surely started moving towards trade-in as pretty much a pseudo-staple in the Dark World deck. And it used to be that Dark World players back in the day would pretty much scoff at this card because, they figured they had this mindset of, well, if it doesn't trigger Grapha, I don't want to run it. And now you realize when you're playing against decks like Fire, Water, Bujin, and Girgia, all of which have pretty much no draw power outside of, Upstart Goblin and Pot of Duality, if you want to count that, getting to your combo pieces quicker and getting to your side deck cards earlier, that's pretty much the difference potentially of a win and a loss, especially games 2 and 3, when it means, getting to that Light Imprisoning Mirror or getting to that Skill Drain or something like that before your opponent gets to their Twister or Full House or whatever. I actually think that the inclusion of trade-ins was probably the best thing to happen to this deck. For starters, it brings players back to the mindset of get Grapha on the board and beat fucking face and just let everything else sort itself out. Don't worry about how many Dark World monsters that I'm going to trigger this turn or all of that other shit. Once you get Grapha, you just keep attacking until he dies, and then you resummon him and you just start the process all over again. And I think that at its core is how Dark World is going to win most of its games. Secondly, it makes you a lot less reliant on your discard outlets, things like Dark World Dealings and Drag Down, which also let your opponent draw cards. Never forget that your opponent could potentially draw their lockdown card, their D-Fissure or something else like that, off of, your Dealings or your Drag Down. Playing trade-in, you don't lose any advantage, and you don't have to worry about your opponent drawing anything. And lastly, I love that it gets Grapha to the graveyard without losing any advantage, and it doesn't give your opponent the opportunity to use something like Debunk, which is cited like crazy nowadays. I think that most Dark World players moving forward and, towards the end of this format have pretty much cut things like Silver and Gold, crappy monsters that really don't do anything except summon Grapha in the deck. And you already have Snow and Brow to do that anyway, so it's like, why are we running these other guys when they're super, super inconsistent, when we can run things like Malefic Stardust Dragon or Dark Creator? Experiment with these cards. They're both trade-in targets. They're both dark for Allure Darkness, so if we get them in our hand and we don't want to use them, we can just get rid of them. They both have on-field effects that aid the deck. Stardust keeps gates protected. Dark Creator Dark Creator's just retarded because it just starts summoning shit from the graveyard. And, cards like Silver and Gold really never had that. I think the Dark World deck has been rising because when you look at the traps people play right now, Fiendish Chain is one of the most highly played cards, and the format does next to nothing versus Dark World. I'm actually seeing a lot less people main decking Dimensional Prison, which bodes well for a card like Grapha because, you can keep running them over. You can keep having to try and rely on something like 101, but there isn't a definitive way to fucking kill this card if you're not gonna banish it. And nobody's really running Shadow Mirror. What happened? I mean, I know Infernity isn't the best deck, but like I can't remember the last time I seen anybody actually run Shadow Mirror in the side deck. You know, hand traps like Effect Veil or Maxi, people main those, practically useless once again against Dark World. And the deck has an absolutely fantastic Bujin match. I have still not beaten a Dark World player yet. I mean, at least a Dark World player who knows what they're doing. You can actually even handle water if you're running Dark Smog and you get, you know, the beige lock to where basically you just keep bouncing beige, discarding beige during like the end phase, removing shit in their graveyard. You can remove title, you can remove Gundy targets, stuff like that, and then just keep bouncing it for Grapha. So it's going to be interesting to see if Dark World is one of those decks that just flames out or if it carries over momentum to next format, because before Primal Origins comes out, at least I can say that Dark World it's fairly legit. You know, if we keep seeing skill drains and we keep seeing things like, you know, Water and Bujin at the top, then I mean, it's just good for Dark World. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching as always. Subscribing makes life happy.